Hello everybody, welcome to number 27, I'm Jack and this is a BMW E30 318 IS. Today we're going to discuss whether this really is a baby BMW M3. Now with only 135 horsepower, I'm a little bit skeptical on that, but we're going to take it out, talk a little bit about it and just see what the driving experience is like. We're also going to talk about the 320 IS, which is probably the E30 that you never heard about. Just a quick aside here, if you enjoy the video and you want to continue to see quirky reviews on cars like this, then please do consider subscribing because it really does make a difference. So what makes a 318 IS? Well, it got the new twin cam engine, which puts out 135 horsepower. That doesn't sound very much, but hopefully it'll be enough to have some fun. It is quite a revvy engine, so probably not a lot of torque low down. But the other things that distinguish this are, interior-wise, you've got these fabulous sports seats, you've got the steering wheel and the gear knob, the M-Tech Sports steering wheel, all very, very nice stuff. And then externally, it came with 14-inch BBSs. This car had the optional 15s. At the front, there's a little sort of separate spoiler, which on the original car was body color. But the owner of this, Nigel, and it was his son George that brought the car today, so thank you to both of you. He seems to think that having the full white dam in white, it basically makes it look unbalanced. So he's put the sort of unpainted little lip spoiler at the bottom. Also, the spoiler at the back, and of course the suspension is the M-Tech suspension. I don't know exactly how that compares to the M3 suspension because I've read in places that the springing on this is the same as the M3, but the damping anti-roll bars, although stiffer, aren't the same. I'm not sure what the truth of it is, but it has some sort of suspension, sort of sports suspension setup. Now crucially, this though is lighter than an M3. It also doesn't have the widened track, but it's the lightweight that makes 318 ISs quite special. The thing is it going to be special enough to compare with an M3? The interior is standard E30 and it amazes me every time I get into a BMW of this era how much better it is than the equivalent Italian, English or French car. I think the differences now aren't quite as big. But in the 80s, there really was a gulf. It's all very functional, it's not flash. I mean, look at that clock. Does it get any simpler than that? But it all works. Everything is pretty good to the touch, just designed to do what it has to do. I mean, this car has 110,000 miles and inside it looks practically new. It has been garaged a lot, so obviously it's fared better than some, but all the same, let's see how the little engine pulls. 1.8. It's an absolute delight. And just about the right kind of power for a narrow, twisty road like this one. It pulls a little bit harder than I was expecting. I think it only weighs 1,150 kilos, this car, so 50 kilos lighter than the equivalent 325. Well, certainly I'm not disappointed by the way it goes. Now, some don't like the floor-hinged pedals. I have to say that, well, it's only the throttle pedal which is hinged. I have to say that for me, it's quite easy to heel and tow. Doesn't bother me at all. I think it's fine. They are a little bit offset to the right, but apart from that, it's a very comfortable car. The sports seats are comfortable. They hold you in place just right. So far, all going pretty well, really. E30s really do have a massive following, and Nick Murray, one of my favourite channels on YouTube, he has his own one back in the back in New Zealand, and he also did a video on a 318 IS, though I think he sort of concentrated more on the general E30 theme rather than the IS side of things. But look, you definitely have to rev it, because ultimately it's a 1.8, and although the car is light, it's not feather light. It is light for one of these, but let's see what it's like on the S's here. Very, very, very balanced. So as you're coming through the tighter corner there, you can kind of feel that the back end and the front, they're both kind of reaching their limits, and it feels like at the same time. I certainly didn't get any slide or anything like that there, so absolutely wonderful, and it really encourages you to play. It's almost like a GTI of the era, but with a little bit more depth. Of course, it doesn't just scrub into sort of wash out understeer when you're pushing it past its limit. Now, you could get these with limited slip diffs. This one I don't think has one. They were an option anyway, and with the amount of power it has, I don't really think that it's needed. Now, the steering is very sort of slack and lacking feel on the straight ahead. Once you're in the corner, it gives you a little bit more back, but I have to say it's probably one of the worst aspects of the car, of E30s and most BMWs of this era. So 80s and 90s BMW, don't know about the later ones, but the steering just definitely lets it down a little bit, which is a shame. But overall, it's such a playful, light, agile thing that the steering doesn't even bother me too much, the fact that it's not the best. It's at around 4.5 where the 1.8 really sort of comes on cam by the feel of it. The gear change is really lovely and light, less bulky than some of the other BMW gear changes I've been used to. It's a little bit long, but it's pretty much in sync with the car. I think the great thing about this 318 IS is that it's really well balanced and set up to exploit the power that it does have. It's not intimidating. I think you can drive it much harder, or I certainly can drive it much harder than I would drive the equivalent M3. But it doesn't feel as serious as an M3 would. It doesn't have as much grip. When you're going quicker as well, the body moves around quite a bit more over undulations and so on, so I don't think the suspension can be the same. But in some ways, this is almost more fun. I think depending on your personality and how power hungry you are, I think quite a lot of people might even prefer this to an M3. For those that are more power hungry, there is another car I want to discuss quickly, and it is the 320 IS. Now, it sounds very similar in name to this, but it's really very, very different. It was a car, I think only 700 were made, very rare, made for the Portuguese and Italian markets where there was punitive taxes over 2-litre cars. Now, whereas this I would compare more to a grown-up GTI competitor perhaps, the 320 really was a sleeve-down M3, so much so that it used the S14 engine. It was just de-stroked to bring it down below the 2-litre threshold. Power was actually 192, so more serious than this. It still retained, though, the really light weight that the 318 has. Didn't have the wider track and so on of the M3. And if you read period road tests, they say that it was actually the better driving car out of that and the M3. Didn't have as much grip. It didn't, because it didn't have the wide track, didn't have as much power or brake as hard, so it didn't go as quick round a circuit. But for ultimate driving pleasure, the 320 IS is supposed to be where it's at. It's interesting because one of my friends from school, his father had a 320 IS, Ciao Giovanni, and I remember him telling me at the time, my dad's got an M3, and then he turned up and it was like, hold on a minute, that's just the 320. And then I looked into it, and this 320 IS really is quite a special car. doesn't look as dramatic as the M3 because it doesn't have the blistered arches and so on, but it is a very special car. I'd love to try one of those. If anyone here in the UK have one, and they're left-hand drive only, of course, but very well worth doing. But back to the 318, how does it compare though to a 325i? Should you be going for this over it? Well, I think this has enough power to have fun. It's a very revvy engine. It doesn't have the torque of a 325, but the steering is better than I remember from a 325, and I think that's because the front end has less weight on it. And so, although you still have the vagueness off center, when it's in the corner, this feels a little bit more agile. So, okay, with a 325, you can bring the back end into play a little bit more if that's your thing, but I think this is at least as good. Different experience really, but at least as good. Now this car, 110,000 miles, but I mean honestly, I would place it as a 30,000 mile car. Really has weathered so well. I know it's been kept extremely well because I've known the owner for quite a while, Nigel. He's brought some of the other Italian cars that you guys have seen that I've done tests on. I think that Nigel originally was going to perhaps sell it at some point. If you're interested, I'm going to put George's email in the video description. So if you do have a 320IS or indeed any other car that you think I might be interested in reviewing, please do get in touch. This is the best way. Thank you all so much for watching. I really look forward to seeing you for the next video.